Hi everyone, and welcome to this video where we look at a member of my classic computer collection. And today we're going to have a look at a computer that's a representative of the MSX standard. It is the Spectravideo 728. So let's check it out. Before I cover the computer itself, I want to spend a bit of time explaining what it represents, that is the MSX standard. I've briefly mentioned this concept before with respect to one of my earlier Spectravideo machines, the 318. That computer was near MSX compatible, but it didn't go the whole hog. This 728 does, so it's only right that I detail MSX more here. So let's go back to the early 1980s, say from 1981 to 1984. The home computer market was a mess. You had a plethora of inexpensive, colourful and noisy machines, each one incompatible with all others, pouring into the market. Programs and peripherals couldn't be shared, and software writers had to learn a new system every time they wanted to port their works to another machine. If you were a parent, or even a kid who had saved up pocket money, buying a new computer model was a risk because you never knew if it was going to be supported or not. Would people write software for it? Would user groups spring up to support it? Would the manufacturer can it just after a few months on the market? For every success story like the ZX Spectrum and the Commodore 64, there were dozens of also-rans. This Tower of Babel of incompatibility was in contrast to the business side of computing, which was starting to settle down to the unexciting but stable world of 8-bit CP/M or the newer 16-bit IBM compatibles. In Japan, Kazuhiko, or Kei Nishi, co-founder of software publisher ASCII Corporation, seeing here in this photo with Bill Gates, had an idea. Why not develop a standard for 8-bit home computers? This is one that would specify the necessary hardware and firmware for those cool graphics and sound effects. A standard would give software developers an incentive to write more programs and bring some order to the chaos that was the home computer market. It seemed like a brilliant concept. Nishi had a very close relationship with Microsoft, so it naturally followed that MSX machines would have the ultimate version of Microsoft Basic for 8-bitters. That was an enhancement of Extended Color Basic, with elements of GW Basic, and lots of commands for handling sound, sprites and graphics. It would reside in 32 kilobytes of ROM, with at least 8 kilobytes of RAM for user programs. In fact, most machines had far more than that, and 16 kilobytes of RAM for the video buffer. On the hardware side, MSX machines would have a Z80 processor running at 3.6 MHz, a Texas Instruments 9918 display chip, a sound processor from General Instruments, the AY38910 for 8-octave 3-channel sound, routed through the connected TV's speaker, an Intel 8255 programmable peripheral interface chip for the input-output, standardized graphic modes, cassette interface, Atari-type joystick ports, and a standardized ROM cartridge slot. Even the keyboard had to conform to a certain standard as regards layout and key mapping. Nishi and Microsoft got many Japanese companies interested in the concept, including such heavyweights as Canon, Hitachi, JVC, National, Mitsubishi, Fujitsu, Sanyo, Sony, Yamaha, Toshiba, and Korea's Gold Star. The MSX standard, MSX standing for Machines with Software Exchangeability, was announced by Microsoft in June 1983, and the home computer world stood by for the Japanese invasion that Jack Tramiel of Commodore had long predicted. So where then was Spectravideo in all of this? Spectravideo was a US company, but it operated out of Hong Kong. It was an early and very enthusiastic backer of the concept, and it worked closely with Nishi and Microsoft, particularly on the MSX version of BASIC. In fact, Spectravideo were a little too enthusiastic. They released a couple of micros, the Spectravideo 318 and 328, in late 1983. This was after the MSX announcement, but unfortunately the machines were designed before the standard was fully defined. They were touted as initially MSX compatible machines, as shown in this ad for the 328, but later this was scaled back to near MSX compatibility. They did give the concept some visibility in Western countries though. Spectravideo released its first fully MSX compatible machine, the 728, in the latter half of 1984. Externally it looked very similar to the 328, with an extensive array of keys. There was a hefty 80 kilobytes of RAM. There was also a host of peripherals available for easy expansion. You can see a few of them here in this diagram. In New Zealand, the 728 arrived in April-May 1985, and you can see it here on the cover of our June edition of New Zealand Bits and Bytes. Once they got their hands on them, most reviewers regarded MSX machines in a very positive light, and the review inside this issue was no exception. Before we look at my specimen, I want to say a few words as to how it came into my possession. It's not often that you visit your hairdresser for a cut and come out with a 1980s home microcomputer under your arm, but I can tell you it does happen. Scott, my hairdresser, knew I collected computers. You know how you talk to your barber or your hairdresser when he's cutting your hair. You find out quite a lot about each other. Anyway, so he knew this was my hobby, and he'd spotted the Spectravideo in a flea market for next to nothing, so he snagged it. When I came into the salon, he had it sitting on the table as a surprise free gift. There were no peripherals or PSU with it, but I took it home to find it worked perfectly with my Spectravideo 318 PSU. Sweet. So thank you very much, Scott. So here's my machine then. It's clean, it's light, and it has a good feel to it. It's all plastic, of course, but the plastic feels fairly rugged, as if it could take a few knocks. Lots of keys, but to me it doesn't seem cluttered. It's just the way everything is set out. It seems kind of minimalist. You can see the cartridge slot in there in the mid-center. Some expansion cards could plug into this, like an 80-column card, but it was normally used for ROM packs containing games. Around the side we have a handy on-off switch and a power socket. You can see the sloping aspect of the console here, good for long sessions at the keyboard. Moving around the back from the left to right we have a TV socket to plug the machine straight into the TV via the aerial connector. Next there is an audio and composite video RCA, pair of RCA sockets, one above the other. Next is a ground socket and then a disk drive connector. The 728 used 360K disks and could run both CP/M and a system called MSX-DOS, which was similar to CP/M but had limited ability to read MS-DOS data. Unfortunately, I don't have any disk drives. An MSX parallel printer port and a cassette port completes the picture at the back. Finally, on the other side are two Atari-compatible joystick ports. Now, I haven't had to open my Spectravideo 728 up yet, but here's one that has been opened, and you can see there's not much to it really. Right, enough of the static pictures, and let's look at some real video. So here's my machine. It is a very attractive looking unit. I just enjoy looking at it. You can see the MSX logo there, and there's the logo telling us exactly what sort of machine it is. It's switched on at the moment, and you can see there's a large button down there labelled power. You can see the red light on, shows that it's going. Got a joystick connected up to it, all ready to go. So the first thing I'll do is just switch it on and show you the splash screen. You can see what it looks like when it starts up, and I'll just type in a very short basic program and run it. I'll then show you how you edit these basic programs on this sort of machine. So we'll just type our program in. I find this keyboard really nice to use. I know some people on the web, there's the odd comment about how mushy the keyboard is, but I don't find this keyboard mushy at all. I find it very good to type on, so maybe it was like the Atari where they had several different types of keyboard. So here we can see our basic program. We've got an illegal function call there, so I've got to correct it, and we can do this quite simply by just using the editing key, the arrow keys here, position the cursor as to where we want to make the change, and run the program again. So it's got a full screen editor, very much like, say, the Commodore in 64. Okay, so I've restarted the machine now, and what I'm going to show you is a game. We'll load it in first. You notice there's a little bit of camera shake, and that's because I'm gingerly holding this camera in one hand, trying to keep it steady, typing with the other hand. So we'll type in run CAS to load a game off our cassette tape, except we're not using a cassette tape, we're fooling the machine into thinking that there's one attached. I'm actually putting out a WAV file through Audacity, through the sound card and into the Spectravideo. So as far as the Spectravideo is concerned, it is connected to a tape recorder, but it's really Audacity and the PC that's doing the work. This is a game called Inca. It takes about 5 minutes to load, but we'll cut it down for the purpose of this video. Now, one thing I've done here is cheat a bit, in that I've got the game loaded on my machine. I'm going to play it, but most of the video you're going to see is actually shot in an emulator, and the reason I've done that is simply that the colours are more representative of what you see on the screen, whereas the camera doesn't really pick them up. So those are the sort of colours I can see. The camera though makes them a lot more muted. So, well, there you can see I've died already. I'm not very experienced with this game. In fact, this period of computing, as far as games are concerned, I really missed out on, or am not familiar with at all. Most of my computer gaming was done at an earlier time with my System 80 back in the early 1980s, and by the time this era arrived, I didn't have that much interest in games. I was in my mid-20s trying to build a career. Still played the odd adventure game like Zork, but these arcade games, I really don't have much of a nostalgic attachment to them. So this is just one MSX game. Gives you an indication of the sort of quality that you get as far as graphics, sound and sprites are concerned. So it's not too bad. And there were hundreds and hundreds, if not thousands, of these games that came out onto the market once these MSX computers were introduced. I'm not going to go through any more, but there are lots and lots of YouTube videos that you can go to and see other examples of these MSX games. Many of them are pretty high quality. When I was researching the machine for this video, I wanted to show you what were regarded as classic MSX games. And unfortunately, all the ones that I found that were regarded as classics, I couldn't get as a cassette image. They were either a disc image or a ROM image, so I couldn't show you any. This is one that was often mentioned. This was Penguin Adventure. And that's often lauded as an extremely good game, and if people are going to pick, at least the top 10 MSX games that came out at that time, Penguin Adventure would be at the top. So have a look around the internet. You can get it as a ROM image, you can get it as a disc image, but not a cassette image, unfortunately. And you may be able to see a few snatches of it on YouTube. So what happened to MSX? Well, contrary to what a lot of people believe, it was actually very successful. It just didn't do so well in those countries that already had some strongly established brands, like Britain with the Sinclair and then Amstrad, the USA and Canada with the likes of Commodore, Apple, etc. But in many countries it was very popular, particularly in Japan, Asian countries like South Korea, some South American countries, Brazil, Argentina, even in continental Europe, the Netherlands and Spain had quite a few MSX enthusiasts. Of course, eventually it did fade as home computers disappeared and were replaced with dedicated gaming machines like Sega's Master System and Nintendo consoles. In fact, many MSX titles written for the MSX standard also appeared on these home consoles when they came out. So how about Spectravideo? Well, they did bring out one more MSX machine, and this was the MSX 738, or the Express as it's sometimes called. And this was a disk-based unit using 3.5-inch floppy disks, so they did have one last model in the lineup. So that's the story of my Spectravideo 728, a machine I'm certainly very glad to own. Well, I hope you enjoyed that look at the Spectravideo 728. So that's all this time. Until next time, keep well, and we'll see you in the next video.